Hello viewers, I have been forced to re-release this content because A&E Networks copyright claimed an animation that was created by the European Southern University about Oumuamua and not A&E. I disputed the claim, however they rejected it, and I received a note from YouTube that my channel could be cancelled, shut down, if I challenge it again. I am therefore re-releasing the video with the content modified so it can't be claimed, but once again it appears that the media does not want me releasing this content, or at least for it to be promoted if it's demonetized. Scientists solve the mystery behind the Oumuamua alien spacecraft comet. Scientists uncover what accelerated an interstellar comet through our solar system. Interstellar object Oumuamua probably moves strangely due to gas, study says. Oumuamua was a comet after all, a study suggests. Mysterious space object Oumuamua, not alien, scientists say. These are just a few of an army of headlines from the mainstream media declaring that the Oumuamua mystery has finally been explained. Oh, by the way, this is the third time this has actually happened, and I hope these examples finally put to rest any sort of notion that the media is more likely to embrace sensationalistic ideas about aliens than they are to swiftly embrace any sort of theory that puts people who believe in extraterrestrial civilizations into a silly category along with people who believe in Bigfoot or the abominable snowman, or as I said before, the abominable snow monster of the north. So what is this theory? Well, put in its simplest terms, this theory proposes the idea that Oumuamua was indeed a comet, even though no cometary outgassing was ever observed with this particular object, because most of the elements that make a comet were burned off in interstellar space, and the only thing that remained of this comet, aside from rock, was hydrogen. And since our instruments are not able to observe hydrogen, that's what was outgassing, and that's what caused Oumuamua to accelerate out of the solar system without any obvious means of propulsion. We've never seen a comet like this, but it is theoretically possible that the rigors of interstellar space could burn off virtually all of the elements that make a comet, except for the hydrogen. It's a very compelling theory, a very elegant theory, and it's almost certainly wrong. Good morning and welcome to episode 3 of my 100K celebration. By the way, if you haven't seen the other 2 episodes associated with this celebration, they will be linked at the end of this video. And by the way, it also includes a contest that's different for every episode, and we're going to have a contest in this particular episode as well, but that's coming up very soon. So, you've seen the introduction that I did in regards to this new theory about Oumuamua, a theory that was so quickly and enthusiastically embraced by the scientific community as being so simple, so elegant, so brilliant, etc. And I'm not actually going to argue with a lot of those words that were used to describe it. Yes, it is simple, it's straightforward, it is even elegant. I wouldn't necessarily call it brilliant, though, and also the fact that it has been so quickly and wholeheartedly embraced without really a whole lot of critical analysis, I find that to be very troubling as well. And so when it came out and when I read it, there are a few holes that even I saw right off the bat. And once again, I'm not an astronomer or an astrophysicist. Yes, I've been studying these topics for decades on my own, them, but I'm not, officially educated in these fields, and there are many things that I don't know about it. So I was hesitant to come out with anything refuting it on my own, even though, as you're going to see later on in the video, I do have a couple of things to say on my own about all of this. But I didn't have long to wait. As a matter of fact, Dr. Avi Loeb, pretty much the only person that's ever going to be critical of these kinds of explanations, simply because the scientific community so desperately wants to prove that this is a natural phenomenon like everything else they see in the universe. Well, he finally did come out with an article. Actually, it didn't take him very long to come out with an article refuting it. And the number of weak points in this explanation are legion, and they are nowhere near as compelling and as elegant as the artificial explanation that Dr. Loeb came up with 5 years ago. The only thing, of course, about an artificial explanation is the fact that the scientific community refuses to believe that extraterrestrial civilizations could possibly be visiting us, or that there's any evidence of their technology that can be observed anywhere in the universe. They simply don't believe that that's possible. And if you think that I'm being a little too harsh on them in this regard, well, you're going to see a couple of quotes from people, again, well-respected in the community, well-respected astronomers, whose views on extraterrestrial civilizations, and also the people who happen to believe that those civilizations might exist and could be responsible for some of the phenomena that we see in the universe, well, this statement is going to blow your mind. So first of all, what makes Oumuamua so unusual in the first place? Well, obviously it's the first interstellar object that we've ever detected passing through our solar system. It also happened to pass very close to our planet within the habitable zone of our solar system. In addition to that, according to analyses of its trajectory, originally it came from a location that corresponded to something called the galactic standard of rest. What that means is it was stationary compared to the objects orbiting the center of the galaxy surrounding it. That would be incredibly useful to something like an interstellar beacon, something used for navigation, and there's only a 0.2% chance that something like that could happen by random happenstance. It was also highly reflective. It was also strangely elongated, but the thing that was the most important about Oumuamua, the strangest thing of all, was the fact that it appeared to accelerate out of our solar system with no visible means of propulsion. That is to say, the sorts of astronomical objects that we observe that do this sort of thing naturally have some sort of cometary outgassing. Outgassing of rapidly evaporating elements, usually water, oxygen, that sort of thing. However, a detailed analysis of Oumuamua conducted with our most advanced scientific instruments produced absolutely nothing. No evidence of any sort of outgassing, dust, residual particles, nothing whatsoever, which led Dr. Loeb to speculate that it was solar radiation alone that caused the observed acceleration, and that could only happen if Oumuamua was very thin, very light, and something very much like a light sail, or perhaps some sort of hollow object, similar perhaps to a rocket booster. And by the way, we have observed similar behavior with rocket boosters and other artificial objects that we ourselves create. But this explanation was quickly rejected by the scientific community as being as ridiculous as believing that Osiris or Zeus was pushing Oumuamua by some sort of strange divine force. And if you think I'm exaggerating here, let me get a quote from Roman Rafikov of Cambridge University, who, by the way, explained that any sort of cometary outgassing would have also caused Oumuamua's rate of tumbling. Oh yeah, that was another characteristic of Oumuamua that was very strange, would have changed the rate in which it was spinning. So any sort of outgassing, whether it be hydrogen or oxygen or anything else, would have changed its behavior, which it didn't. However, after saying this, Rafikov said that he was, quote, very suspicious of such theories, adding that nonetheless he preferred an explanation that does not involve aliens or divine forces. Let me say that again. An explanation that does not involve aliens or or divine forces. So what that means is anybody who believes that an astronomical phenomena might be caused by an extraterrestrial civilization is as irrational as somebody who might believe that the Greek or Egyptian gods might be responsible for it. It's hard to believe that people this educated would say something that stupid. But ironically, herein lies one of the biggest problems with this theory. By the way, this was proposed by Jennifer Bergner of the University of California, Berkeley. And by the way, I've got no problem with what she's doing here. This is a very innovative theory in an environment where if you propose these sorts of natural theories, you are likely to further your career as opposed to embracing the theories of Avi Loeb, which is akin to committing professional suicide just as surely as if you decided to become an anti-vaxxer or a climate change denier. And yeah, I just triggered a whole bunch of people right there, but let's go ahead and move on. I do that a lot in my videos, but that is the point. If any sort of outgassing, regardless of the element, caused Oumuamua to accelerate more than 100,000 kilometers beyond its predicted trajectory, that would have caused the tumbling rate of Oumuamua to change in some way, which it never did. The rate of tumbling for this object remained steady, consistent, and predictable, again, very much like an artificial object. And incidentally, the reason that these unconventional theories keep getting proposed is because we didn't observe any sort of visible outgassing, and so scientists continue to put forward theories where the outgassing would not have been observable. First, they started with a hydrogen iceberg, which is the strangest thing I've ever heard of, and by the way, that was debunked, and then it was followed up by a nitrogen iceberg. That was also debunked, and now finally, a comet that no longer has any gas that could cause any outgassing except for the one gas that we couldn't detect with our instruments. In other words, hydrogen. But this explanation is just as full of holes as the previous ones, and Avi Loeb does a great job of explaining that to us. Quote, since Bergner and Seligman, who are the authors of the paper by the way, admit that a pure water iceberg or pure hydrogen iceberg are not viable models for Oumuamua, it's unclear how mixing two failing models would make a successful solution. In particular, when hydrogen evaporates from a water iceberg, it would give less kick to the water than to a pure hydrogen iceberg because of the higher molecular weight of water. Moreover, if hydrogen evaporates easily from water ice, then it would not survive the journey, just as in the case of a pure hydrogen iceberg. These issues are not addressed in the new paper. In addition, and this is a personal observation, as you can see from this animation, Oumuamua passed extremely close to the sun. If Oumuamua was comprised mostly of hydrogen, then it would have been destroyed by the intense heat from the sun, given the fact that hydrogen has the lowest boiling point of any element in the universe. In addition to that, if it only had a small amount of hydrogen and was mostly rock, then all of the hydrogen should have been burned away when it made its closest approach to the sun, not when it was a significant distance away from the sun when it continued to accelerate. In addition to that, the entire idea that water ice on a comet in interstellar space is going to be converted into hydrogen because of the rigors of the interstellar environment and the millions and millions of years that it takes to travel between stars, well, that is also an absurd notion given the fact that the other interstellar object that we have observed, the first interstellar comet, 21 Borisov, behaved exactly like a comet, and Avi Loeb points this out. Quote, Oumuamua cannot be a typical comet like 21 Borisov since there was no evidence for any carbon-based molecules or dust around Oumuamua based on deep infrared observations by the Spitzer Space Telescope. If the authors were correct, and Oumuamua was a typical water ice comet exposed to cosmic rays, then the interstellar object 21 Borisov would not have appeared to possess an obvious cometary tail. In fact, long-period that comets from the solar system's Oort cloud are exposed to the same cosmic ray environment as interstellar objects like Oumuamua because they are outside the heliosphere where the solar wind is stopped from protecting them. Yet, Oort cloud comets do show the familiar cometary tails. Arguing that a generic icy comet is without a tail is like saying an elephant is a generic zebra just without showing its stripes. Of course, there could be exceptions where the evaporation rate is low, but those would not account for the excess acceleration of Oumuamua, which requires that at least a tenth of the object's mass be lost in a tail when the acceleration was observed. Dr. Loeb then goes on to examine the problem in greater detail. To understand how much mass is needed to evaporate from Oumuamua, let's go through some numbers. Cometary evaporation leads to the rocket effect, through which the momentum of the evaporated gas towards the sun is pushing the object away from the sun. This is the same mechanism that pushes rockets or jet planes. The new model requires that molecular hydrogen account for the significant fraction of the total mass and most of it to evaporate. When Oumuamua was observed, the temperature of the evaporated hydrogen was on an order of 100 degrees Kelvin above absolute zero. The speed of the evaporated hydrogen cannot be larger than the thermal speed of a hydrogen molecule at that temperature, about a kilometer per second, which is a few percent of the speed of which Oumuamua left the Earth. The atomic mass of oxygen is 16 times that of hydrogen, meaning that water, 2 hydrogen atoms per oxygen atom, carries 8 times more mass than the hydrogen mass in it. Therefore, if we assume, in the most favorable case, that all of the hydrogen evaporated from Oumuamua, the velocity kick in the remnant object would amount to a few percent divided by 8, which is 0.3% of Oumuamua's speed near the Earth. The observed push of Oumuamua was about 0.1% of Oumuamua's speed. This implies that a third of all the available hydrogen in the water iceberg must evaporate in order to give Oumuamua the observed kick. Given that Oumuamua was the size of a football field, it is unclear how a third of its total hydrogen mass can escape from a depth of tens of meters to its surface without pushing out water molecules along the way. Indeed, familiar comets show water vapor with dust. Oumuamua cannot be a typical comet because it did not look like a typical comet. These are huge flaws in this argument, massive problems in this so-called elegant, perfect, natural explanation, an explanation that would have us believe that a comet that lost all of its water ice in interstellar space and only had hydrogen remaining somehow retained that hydrogen after a very close encounter with the sun, and then, strangely enough, started gassing that hydrogen into space at a distance where hydrogen shouldn't be a gas at all. All of these things make this explanation completely implausible, and yet Dr. Loeb is the only one bringing these topics up. Why is this? Well, once again, it's because the scientific community is desperate to embrace any explanation that would make Oumuamua a natural phenomenon rather than an artificial one. And Avi Loeb closes his article as follows. Sometimes I feel like the kid in Hans Christian Andersen folktale who suggested that the emperor has no clothes, while the adults watching the procession insisted that the emperor is dressed with fancy clothing. In my case, the emperor is Oumuamua, and the clothes are its invisible cometary tail. So all of us have heard about the Fermi Paradox, I would assume. The whole idea that given the length or the time the universe has been in existence, given the age of the universe, even at a small percentage of the speed of light, some civilization would have had the capability to visit every solar system in the galaxy by now. Many times over, actually. So where are they? Well, as I have argued since I began this channel, and really this is something I believe for some time, they're here. They've always been here. There's evidence of their existence all around us. And finally, we have an object that's passed through our solar system that passes all of the criteria for a piece of extraterrestrial technology that's actually come a bit uncomfortably close to our own planet. It's an amazing thing. It's something that should be studied more thoroughly, and more theories should be proposed. But instead, the scientific community, the dictatorship, the tyranny of the majority in the scientific community tells us that if we come up with any sort of theories like this, if we say that this is the work of some sort of extraterrestrial civilization or of an advanced mind outside of our own species, then if you believe in that, you also believe in Osiris and Athena and Zeus, and that they're influencing things that we see around the universe. You are just as irrational. And of course, if they believe that you are that irrational, you're not going to get any grant funding, you're not going to get any sort of prestigious positions, and you're not going to have a very promising career. And that's why so few scientists actually come out with any sort of extraterrestrial explanation, any sort of artificial explanation for these phenomena. It's unacceptable. It's not scientific, and it's the kind of thing that we used to see back during the times of Galileo, the tyranny of the Catholic Church, insisting that we stick to their paradigm rather than propose ideas that they thought could not be true. It's hard to believe that that sort of idiocy exists today, but it does exist, as we have seen in this episode. Smash that like, hit that subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Also, I'm leaving for Alabama in a few days. If you'd like to support that trip, just a little bit more help would be appreciated. The links are in the description. And as always, guys, stay angry about space.